Well, maybe describe the most dramatic setting that the Guild has ever worked in.
That would have to be the huge charrette that we held. Actually, it wasn't just the Guild, but we had probably 30 Guild members that were involved, I guess, something like that. But it was the largest planning event in the history of humanity. I got a call, actually Wanda got the call originally, right after Hurricane Katrina, and I came home, I believe it was on a Friday, or whatever day it was, and she said, "You've got to take this call." I said, "Oh, I'm tired, I want to go to bed." She said, "No, you really must. It's from Michael Branco in Mississippi. They have a very urgent thing he needs to talk to you about." And so he said, "Steve, can you come over here? This is the week of the storm. Can you come over here? And we're putting together a governor's commission for how to rebuild Mississippi. Can you tell us how to rebuild in a New Urbanist way?" And I said, "Well, that's way too important for just me. Let me call up my friend Andres Duany and ask him if he will go and do it." And so I got together the next day with Andres, and he said, "Well, you know, that's more important. That's too important for just me too. Let's call in the entire Congress for the New Urbanism." And so that's what we did. And so this planning event between the Congress members and the local architects and planners, there were almost 200 people in a blown out room in one of the casinos in Biloxi working for a week. And this was just 6 weeks after the storm. There were literally guard stations. You had the people with machine guns that were guarding the area that you had to go past that to get in. The place was completely devastated, as anyone knows who I guess everyone who watched the video of what happened there. But it was an absolutely unprecedented event to have a charrette in that kind of a setting. So that would have to be the most dramatic.
Well, I think you've been in some pretty scary kind of situations, even in other countries, haven't you?
Well, actually, yeah. There was one that Prince Charles visited a place it's a place called Rosetown in Kingston, Jamaica, and was so moved by the plight of the people in that neighborhood that he said, "We have to do something about this." Well, he called up Andres Duany, and he said, "Will you do a charrette to help mend this neighborhood back together?" It had been just destroyed by political violence 30 years ago, and the government had literally bulldozed a no man's land right out of the middle of the whole neighborhood. And so we came in there. I was one of the consultants on the charrette. I've done a lot of charrettes with DPZ, and we worked there for a week. And at the end of the week, when we were about to do our final presentation in a church there in the neighborhood, there was a massive gun battle right about an hour before the final presentation. And so when we arrived at the church, from where we'd been working a few blocks away, there were tanks in the streets and all this, and so that was a pretty interesting one too. Since then, I've gone back as a consultant for the Princess Foundation, and come up with an incredibly cool way, just totally by accident, of how to code for the architecture of the place. I'll just tell you briefly, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that what happened on the walls of this neighborhood, and in some cases the walls were old bombed out buildings, in other cases they were just tin roofing that was put up in haphazard fashion, because it's really a shanty town. And I noticed that on the walls people had written all these things that can only be called proverbs. It was in some cases an actual proverb from the Bible about a certain way to behave or whatever. In other cases it was things that they made up themselves, but they were very carefully painted on the walls. And I was thinking, because my task was to write the architectural code during that charrette, and I thought, well, what if we do kind of follow the lead of the people, and instead of trying to come up with some book, because nobody, when people are hungry poor, nobody is going to buy a $50 book on how to build a house. There's some of these people are living out, literally sleeping under the stars. They don't even have a roof over their head. And so I thought, well, what if we try to do a code that is just maybe a dozen pages, and it's just composed of a few little proverbs of how to, build above the floods, so that when the floods come, that you won't be left homeless or whatever. And so I did that, but on the day before the charrette ended, I realized, this won't work either. See, I'm from the Deep South, if you can't tell. And back in the 60s when I was a little kid, I remember visiting some family members who didn't yet have indoor plumbing. And I know what happened back then to the Sears catalog. It got repurposed out in the outhouse. And so there's no shadow of a doubt what was going to happen in about a week with a 10-page architectural code on paper. No shadow of a doubt what was going to happen. It would all get repurposed also, and so it would do no good. So I thought, well, wait a minute now, why don't we do what the people do? Why don't we actually write the Proverbs on the wall? You know, the walls surrounding all the streets. And so the last day of the charrette, we took one of the Proverbs that said to plant your yard with things you can eat. For why should your yard lay fallow while you spend more of your money at a grocery store? And we painted that on the wall. Well, at the end of the day, we did the final presentation, and after the presentation there were 200 people or whatever milling around and talking and stuff. And then one of the local architects came up to me and he grabbed me by the elbow and he said, "Steve, come here, you got to see this." I said, "What?" He said, "Just follow me." So I followed him out the door, and as we stepped out into the night air, I could hear them singing. It was the voices of little children. I went out there, and they were taking those words that were never meant to have rhythm or rhyme, and they were turning them into a song. Now, we can't do that. We can only set the stage for something like that to happen, where the people actually make the ideas their own. And so I'm now thinking that, and that was a complete accident, you understand? But I'm now thinking that that may be one of the great breakthroughs in how you actually start these things that we call living traditions, that the people actually own. It's like, yeah, this is us. This isn't some consultant flying in from Miami or wherever to tell us what to do. This is us. This is ours. And so, anyhow, that was one of the coolest things that's happened to me in quite some time.